Il est pile 15, je pense qu'on peut y aller. On va peut-être attendre la dernière personne qui arrive. C'est bon pour vous dans le couloir? On m'a dit d'attendre.
Are we good? Are there still people waiting to get in? I've been asked to wait for a couple of minutes.
Parfait. Merci à tous d'être présents.
Anyway, thank you very much for being present.
L'objectif
Well, the objective of today's conference, and mind you, this is not really a conference, but we're here to give you feedback. We're here to tell you a story about what we've gone through and what we've done with relatively small structures which are not really mature in terms of cybersecurity. But I will set the scene. I will tell you what happened with these clients, and I will give you some feedback on cybersecurity at the level of these structures, the kind of support that we gave them, and what our experience has been by and large with these partners. So this is what I'm going to talk about with you this afternoon. My name is Mouedine Abash. I'm the CONIX Security Engineering Center officer. I've been working in cybersecurity since 2010. I'm a cyber defense instructor, and I've been so since 2014. And I will leave it at that. The idea is not to talk about me and where I come from. The idea is really to get to the crux of the matter and talk about the different sectors and the different organizations which need different levels of support. And this is how I'm going to start this presentation. We'll try and contextualize what I want to tell you. I'm not going to be exhaustive. You have the right to agree, you have the right to disagree, you have the right to be of a different opinion. This is quite obvious, and that is what our line of business is made of. Our experience over the past couple of years regarding public companies, sorry, the screens are quite small, but for public companies, there has been a plan, the France Relance plan, which has been started. What is it all about? Well, it's about making cybersecurity means available to public organizations, such as remediation plan, remediation support, and the possibility to keep a cybersecurity level that is as high as possible, with a specific focus on public organizations for OIVs and OSEs. We also have a French regulation with the NIS European regulation, where different structures are asked to be compliant with the legislation and are expected to put in place a number of means to secure their facilities and their infrastructures. The larger structures, the CAC 40 structures, and those who are more mature from the point of view of cybersecurity because they've been impacted by cyber events, have developed quite a high maturity level compared to other structures. They have the human resources. They're quite attractive, you know, and the cyber experts can therefore help them out, and they are very often recruited in order to bring something to these structures. There are financial means, and we'll see why this is so important. And you know that money is the sinews of war. You need money in order to secure the facilities, even though this is not the primary goal. And then you've got other categories where there are means, where something exists. This is the case for SMEs, very small enterprises, and intermediate-sized enterprises. They they have very little control over their system and their ecosystem. There are guides, there is the ANSI guide, there is the BPI guide. We can only but welcome these initiatives. I have nothing to say against these guides, but the problem is that these structures don't know how to apply them because of a lack of maturity, but also because they do not have the means and the expertise to apply them. You know, we're not the only one to say this. It's not only me, Mouedine Abash, who says it. I'm not going to read out here what you will see on the screen. We know that this has a big impact in terms of the cyber events which are likely to occur at the level of these structures. And this is quite a common occurrence, as you can see. We at CONIX, and I've used quotes that are quite recent. One comes from the Flash Eurobarometer that was issued quite recently, less than a week ago, but in 2020 we launched a program focused on SMEs and intermediate-sized enterprises which had a very low digital maturity. The purpose of this program is to help them securing their information system over the short to the medium run. The objective was to have a bird's eye view of their information system and understand how they work, to know what the crown jewels are and what is the real impact of an incident, even though this incident can come in many different forms. And we've integrated the insurance part, which is increasingly important, as we'll see later with a case study, where insurance was a key point, but not a positive key point, but it could have been a game changer in order to take out a cyber insurance. It's like when you take out an insurance policy for your car, you have to comply with a number of requirements so as to benefit from an insurance policy. And this is a difficulty when you don't have the means or when you have a low cyber security maturity. And the idea is to draw up an action plan that they're going to use in order to help them out in putting into place a cyber program. I'm saying this because this is a very topic of my conference today. This is something that we rolled out in 2020. Back in 2020, things moved very fast from a cyber and non-cyber point of view, and that's what we did. It worked quite well. We have about 30 RECs on this particular program, and all I'm going to say comes from this particular method. Well, to get to the nitty-gritty, I would like to talk about the context. What do we hear from the customers? The customers say we are well aware of of what you're talking about. Well, our finding has been that the small structures have been made increasingly aware of the importance of cybersecurity, the importance of the impact of these cybersecurity events on their crown jewels. That is to say, their core values, if you want, their family jewels. Cybersecurity is fully integrated. This is something that we know, and we know that status quo is not an option. And it does not mean that we should reinvent the wheel. And I know that ANSI, as well as a number of other structures, engaged in awareness-raising sessions, and this has been really useful. 100% of the companies that we offered support to throughout the program knew that cybersecurity was a major challenge even before we stepped in. This is quite a good indicator, but they were also aware that their level was quite low and that they had not enough means to seek the right level of support. cybersecurity is a wide-ranging subject. This is way too technical, especially if you do not have any digital expertise, when this is not your core business. Cybersecurity is a wide-ranging subject, but this is also a very complex language. This may sound anecdotal, but it could be consuming. I was talking about buzzwords, and for me, buzzwords are not necessarily, improper words. But these are words that you can come across quite regularly. One of them is zero trust. And all of these buzzwords can, be confusing to our clients and customers. We try to keep up to date, but it can be either too complex because you are very much in the dark because of your lack of technical expertise, or you find it difficult to keep up. The things are moving on so fast, even for us experts. It's quite difficult to keep up. That is why we need to make choices on what is our area of interest or what is a topical news. But it's nearly impossible to do everything. Cybersecurity is a subject that is difficult to access. There is a domino effect that is associated with the mature structures or those structures which have more resources. There is a shortage of experts in the field of cybersecurity, but not only. And it's true that people have a tendency to turn to large structures, but in case of a shortage, people are not going to change their behavior and all of a sudden to rely on small structures. And those structures which do not have a high cybersecurity maturity, I find it difficult to recruit experts who might support them simply because they are hard to find, but also because they might not necessarily be interested, and simply because they do not offer any professional development. This could be one of the reasons why those structures are not as attractive as other structures in the field of cybersecurity. Earlier on, I talked about the business values. Business values are very important, especially when we talk about the difference that cybersecurity can make in terms of production. Let me explain myself. A company that makes geomatics does not necessarily need cybersecurity. They map streets, they map the underground, but they do not necessarily need a cyber security for the purpose of their production. They need cyber security for protection purposes, and very often we fail to make the link. The clients find it difficult to make a link between what I want to produce and the need to protect this using cybersecurity means, even though there is not necessarily any link between the two. Sometimes there isn't even a digital environment that the two share. So this is a subject that is difficult to access, and I must say that this is something that caused us to rack our brains. Because obviously, I don't want to stigmatize any specific structure, because this has been something that has been generalized over every type of structure. But editors, ESNs, or any other structures delivering cyber means, it could be authorities. Well, working with them, you do not give the same interest as the interest given by large and resource-rich structures. We've identified a difference in terms of the relationship between the editor and the large structure and the relationship between an editor and a small structure. The ROI is quite different, obviously, and this does have an impact on these small structures. And finally, the means. I told you about human expertise. there is a shortage of HR, which is further exacerbated by the cost inflation. Whether we're talking about a service company, because the service company have experienced a real boom in the cost, and you've got also the internal costs that are related to cybersecurity. The problem is that those costs are way too high for a relatively small structure, and you can't rely on a cybersecurity event simply when you are a small structure, simply because you don't have enough money in your IT budget. And anyway, the IT budget is far from being enough. There is also a lack of financial mechanism included, high value added, together with simple and dedicated solutions. It's difficult to come up with dedicated and straightforward solutions for companies coming from so many different sectors. But this is also what I told you about by a way of introduction when I talked about authorities, because authorities fail to invest massively on these structures. And finally, there is also here the focus on insurers. What we've identified is that every people who've taken part in our program, every of our clients asked us what we think of cyber insurance programs, what our experience had been, whether we had anything we could share with them, whether this was more or less complicated to put in place in terms of compliance. And what our experience has been is that the insurance companies working with our clients, they used to sell a cyber insurance policy without necessarily realize that this policy didn't really adapt to the environment of the companies, and therefore that it would be difficult to reach the compliance level so that they can fully benefit from the cyber insurance. And this has been our experience at every audit that we've been part of. By and large, what are our findings? Cybersecurity should start by securing control over the information system. And as we will see later, investments are made, but not necessarily in the right direction. Well, this is part of the know-how for which we need sharing of experience. The action plan are way too little defined. We found the structures which dedicated means, which have really taken up a commitment in terms of cybersecurity and in terms of run IT. But the means made available for protecting the information system, the data, or whatever the objective of the means made available, the problem is that we do not really ensure the protection of the core business, meaning to say, in case of a cyber event, there's going to be quite a strong impact. I will illustrate this later. Means are very often under-evaluated because of a lack of maturity. This is one of the conclusions that I have drawn from our experience. We might need to revisit our fees so that we can adapt our fee scale to these infrastructures. It's just not possible for those small infrastructures to pay through the nose for an expert and to pay as much as 1,000 euros a day for being helped out by an expert, especially since they only have a budget of 15,000 euros. This does not work, and this does not come as a surprise. That is why we should find a way. I've got here several feedback that we could maybe talk about. I spent the first 20 minutes of this presentation setting the scene. I would like now to tell you a story, the story of what my experience has been with CONIX and our customers. I could tell you many of these stories, and everything that I'm going to talk about is something that I and others have truly experienced. I've already spoken for 23 minutes, and I don't think that I will have time for a Q&A session with you. I'm sorry. But anyway, I'll make sure that if you have questions, that you get an answer to these questions. I'd like to share three stories with you. It's a company. I already told you about this company. A company that is specialized in flow mapping, and network mapping, another that is present in the agri-food sector, and the third one is about a law firm. These have been three completely different experiences. These companies have a very low maturity when it comes to cybersecurity and information system, and the idea is to share our REC with them. Very first RECs, we have a structure that says, Muedin, I just took over a company. I'm the main shareholder, but I have doubts, despite due diligence and the risks that have been identified, I have doubts about the security of my information system. For every structure, I'm going to share you some sort of an identity card. This is an SME, 40 people, the turnover 3 million euros, a line of business, geomatics, topography, mapping. The objective, when we are asked to step in and work with people like this, is really to take stock of the situation from a cybersecurity point of view, using the program that I told you about in my introduction. The cost is adapted to the structure, and people have the impression that they do not know everything and that they are somehow being kept in the dark, and they want to improve their knowledge. And what we do is that we perform an audit. Well, another contextual element is that they've got an information system, one that part that is in the cloud. It's mainly the mail that's in the cloud. The rest is on premise. They have an information manager, and this manager, very early on in the process, we try to establish a context. What is it that you do? What are your tools? What do you do on a day-to-day basis? What kind of information that you are at the risk of losing? What are your family jewels? And who are you working with? And we very quickly identified a topic. We work with a large structure, and this large structure is going to audit us. We know that as part of the supplier's cybersecurity review, they are going to be audited soon. They don't know when, but they're going to be audited on their cybersecurity level. This is part of the client-supplier relationship. The second piece of information we know is that they have been working with an information manager, but the problem is that they know very little and they don't have really control about what this info manager does. And he is responsible for the outsourcing of backup, and he's responsible for backup. But what is it that happens? Do you have control over what this manager does? The very first question we ask them is whether they have control over the supplier relationships with their information manager. And very often the follow-up question is to know whether they have a contract, whether they have signed a contract with this manager. But it's quite normal for this type of services to be contractualized. Here, the facility management, well, the customer knew very little about facilities management. The customer says, my facilities manager, he administers the systems, he does network administration, and he also, yes, he does the network administration, and he also provides a security tool administration, the antivirus, the anti-spam. He contributes to the operational update. He administers the backup. He hosts a backup, and is involved in the processing and treatment of incidents or anomalies. But when we talk with facilities manager, we realize that there is quite a big gap insofar as this manager does not do what the client expects. They speak two different languages. We know that sometimes, there is information that is missing during communication. But the problem is that there are a number of things which are not updated, and this is a vulnerability. But by digging deeper, we ask them to present us with a copy of the contract, because you can't really blame it all on the facilities manager. So we managed to get our hands on the contract, and it proved even worse. Well, I hear some of you laugh, but this has been our experience, We looked at the contract, and in the contract we read that the facilities manager is expected to outsource backup in his own premises, and is expected to process the incidents related to backups. And that's what he does for 80 euros per month, all tax included. And that's when you scratch your head and you realize that this is certainly not an option. So it was some sort of a gentleman's agreement that had taken place between the former owners and this facilities manager. This contract had not been updated, and the problem is that they supply, the office stationery, and in return they manage information. I could talk about many other examples like this one. There are many of these structures which work with a facilities manager. This means that you need to trust your facilities manager, and putting your trust in a structure, in individuals to manage your information system, to reduce the risk, or at least to mitigate the risk. And here you've got the client that has expectations, saying that he will be audited soon. On the other hand, you've got a provider that does more or less what the client expects him to do. And you also have this fee of 80 euros a month. And the problem is that we have very little detail about the technical information. And by and large, I've included the guide because it's important. We should have told our client that ANSI issued a guide, a well-written guide on how to control facilities management risks. What you should do as a client is to take everything you will read in this guide and enforce it. If it had not been done before, it will not be done after because of a lack of knowledge. We limited what they had to do. Before relying on a facilities manager, we told them that they should map their information system. We know that our client have the capacity to do their information system mapping. It's pretty straightforward. All you need is your access, but it's quite, straightforward. It's important to, dot the I's and cross the T's with the facilities manager. Make the most of guides such as this one. There are other guides. Take inspiration from them. And that's in fact what we advised our client to write down the specifications. We recommended that he used all of the invoices that had been issued. I'm here talking about the invoices of licenses. That's how you should start. Take all of the invoices related to the licenses, and it gives you an idea of where you stand in terms of information system administration. And I must say that this guide is a real wealth of information when it comes to facilities management. The problem is that the customer knew very little about it and didn't even know that such a guide existed. When we told them that this guide actually existed, he obviously relied on it, and we managed to draw up a real contract with a series of commitments and services. There are very little facilities manager including a catalog of services in their contract. And here, it's not so much the infrastructure that you should help, it's really the facilities manager that you should help. Well, the facilities manager was quite a small structure, and he was actually quite good at what he did. You know, he knew what he had to do, and he could support the structure in return for financial means. Well, for 80 euros, obviously, it was way too little money to talk about a decent level of service. But that's what we did. We helped them out in contractualizing the provision of services applying to administration and backup. And we, CONIX, we provide follow-up. We usually provide a follow-up over a 1 year to 2 year period. We look into the support that they might need in terms of contractualizing the relationship with the facilities manager.
As I was saying, with the facility manager, you need a trust relationship. But still, you need to pay attention, to set up committees, to understand what is going on, to understand what is the facility manager doing, in order later on to carry out an audit with the customer. Don't forget, the context is, I've bought a structure and I'm going to be audited. It went well, but once again we have a gap between what was existing and what the customer had in hands. What did they have? Well, they had a guide on how to secure a system. Then, second example, a company that got audited by a competitor, and they said, we'd like CONIX to take part in a counter audit to tell us precisely whether what we did was consistent with the action plan we had to implement and whether it has a positive impact on our production. So this is an agri-food company in charge of manufacturing and distribution, and they asked us to do a counter audit. We did it. What do we do when we do a counter audit? Well, we look at all the reports of the audit, we look at the action plan, and we compare. We noticed that some means had been made available. However, solutions were not always properly implemented. This brings us to the complexity of the cyberspace. In the action plan, they were supposed to have a centralized directory. So we decided to have a centralized directory for legal management, especially on filers. So we integrated a tool this is part of the Active Directory. And IAM, to do IAM, you have methods, you have solutions, technical solutions that exist. And you need processes and you need some organization, you need some governance. If there was no governance in our case, this means that the solution was not bringing solution to the technical issues. Let me give you an example. We did legal management, so we created some users, we integrated stations within an Active Directory. On that physical server, we added a file server that is not up to date, on which we have no security policy with local policies, GPOs for centralized management or other. We have no segmentation between users and administrators of the information system. Why? Well, because some environment required administrator rights. So we realized there was an issue. We told them there was something wrong going there, because our competitors asked them to implement something to have a centralized management of the rights, and in the end, because of that, the company lowered their security level by doing legal management in the wrong way. They created an Active Directory, they have a Windows server that is not updated, that not been updated for more than a year. With everything that is going on at the moment, 1 year is way too much. This is why we decided to warn them, because they had added some services to respect the audit that were lowering their security and increasing their vulnerabilities. So instead of increasing the security level, they decreased it. Obviously, we are on a counter audit, so we want to bring solutions to the customer, and we carried out and continued our counter audit. Second step, antivirus. They had the native Windows solution, and in the previous action plan of the audit, it was said that it would be better to have an antivirus with a centralized management. Indeed, this is an exemplary idea. Let's put it in context. What's the goal of centralized management? Well, the goal is to have centralized indicators so that I can have all the indicators on my administration platform. I can have some efficiency indicators, for instance, and so on. But they didn't know about this console, this platform. Let's say that the indicators may not be that useful for a company that is not fully mature, so let's focus on the antivirus efficiency. We realized very quickly that the data between the centralized console and people on the workstations are not assessed and collected. So you have a solution that was implemented with the centralized management. You take the solution, the X file, you implement it on your directory, and you think and you believe it's going to work. So you implement the server, you implement the centralized antivirus, and you add one more vulnerability to your information system. Antiviruses were not protected, which means that anybody could go on the antivirus, right-click on the tool, deactivate the agent, and even deactivate the policy. So it was a vulnerability. So you had an antivirus by default, and that's it. This will not really add a cyber risk, but the level of cybersecurity has not been increased. And finally, the firewall. They launched a firewall. We won't get in the details, but they have a double firewall that is managing VLANs. They do inter-VLAN routing, so they manage separately the VLANs. And we realized very quickly that the firewall was not getting any requests within the IS. It's filtering the in and out requests, but anything that is happening on the information system is not filtered. So very quickly we realized there was an impact. If tomorrow somebody was downloading the wrong email with ransomware, for instance, it would spread very quickly. So that was an issue and a cause of concern. What we mean by this is that an action plan is not simply implemented by adding some applications. It will not increase your cyber maturity. The whole project must be well prepared with an analysis of the context. And if I do an audit, they tell me you need to increase your cyber security and so on, and add tools and you name it. Fine, it's good. It's good to add tools, but they need to be set up to be efficient. We are convinced that it is necessary to set them up properly. Some tools that are supposed to add more security can represent a vulnerability in small structures, in small companies, and they can lead to more serious attacks. Customers, they need to strengthen their protection. Let's take the example of the antivirus. If you have an antivirus, well, you need to have an administrator account with the password to make sure nobody can deactivate it. A lot of SMEs don't do that. For cyber attacker, it's very easy to deactivate an antivirus if it's not protected. I'm not questioning the efficiency of the antivirus. I'm just saying that it has to be protected to be efficiently implemented. There are a lot of detection solutions that work well, but if they are not properly set up, you won't get the proper information, and your analysis will be wrong.
On pourrait parler d'efficacité de la sonde de détection, mais ce n'est pas l'efficacité technologique de la sonde de détection, c'est juste l'efficacité liée à notre architecture.
So the problem doesn't come from the detection systems or detection probes, but from our infrastructure. And finally, the final example is the following. You know, bottom right, you have the button that says that it's downloading. What is good is to add new systems, but you need to update them. So as I was saying, final example. We have a law firm that reached out to us. They said, look, I got hit by a cyber attack. My information system doesn't work anymore. I mean, they said my computer doesn't work anymore. The information system is pretty easy. It's a server with an old Windows client and 4 workstations. Phishing, cyber attack that spread, a CryptoLocker ransomware. It was some time ago. We had no possibility to unlock the CryptoLocker. You had a ransom required in cryptocurrency that was representing 5,000% of the IT budget. Let's be clear, we were stuck. We were in a dead end. But not only for that, because this is the end of my slide. You had an insurance company that had offered a contract. But there were some requirements. The requirements were not respected, but it was impossible to respect for the customer, because they were asking on-premises protection, which was not possible because the employees were a bit like nomads. So they were stuck. They had no information system anymore. The law firm had to keep working, and the cyber attackers were asking for $350,000. Our customer asked us a very simple question. Should I pay? Should I not pay? The answer is easy. Don't pay. First of all, that's the recommendation of the authorities. We tell them why, and then we tell them, personally, we do not recommend you to pay, and we explained why. First of all, there's no guarantee. Even if you pay, the attacker may not unlock your information system. Moreover, it will not solve your problem. You had no EDR, no protection of your information system, so you're not solving the problem. The customer said, look, I need to resume my business. I'm ready to pay to have some hope. And we told them, no, don't pay. And we try to find remedies. We will launch remediation. There's some data we will never retrieve because it's impossible, but we can get back some of the data. But you cannot unlock the workstation. Some of the data is lost. So it was impossible to resume activity at that moment. Obviously, we did not pay. We launched a remediation project, and at that moment, we'll reintegrate the information system of the customer from scratch. We invest on new equipment, more recent equipment that can be updated. We strengthen the environment. It's Windows 10. The environment was Windows 10. We did not strengthen it with the scripts that would cost them 10,000 euros and so on. Not at all. We will use the existing tools. some competitors looked at the different tools that exist, including EDRs, and we used an EDR and we tried to retrieve data we could get back, including on emails. And then we decided to save data. We considered efficient ways to save data. And for a while, we monitored the information system. 4 workstations, that's not a lot. So we monitored what was going on, and we tried to find solutions if we see something fishy. So we launched a remediation project that is adapted to the attack and to the financial means of that law firm, and adapted to their needs, because the need was for them to resume activities very quickly. And obviously, it was important they would not pay. It was difficult for them to understand that it was very risky, because they may not get the data back. So there are plenty of rules. I could tell you about all those rules for hours. But if you want to increase your cybersecurity level, it has to be contextualized to your information system. You map your IS based on the means you have. You try to ensure minimum security, not especially by adding solutions and so on, even if it's useful, but by being supported, accompanied by experts. We saw it in the first example. The customer had a guide from BPI France. The customer was interested in cybersecurity, wanted to work on cybersecurity, and it's good, but we really need to develop a business culture around cybersecurity. Just like in some factories, they do it about safety or hygiene and so on. It's just that important. Cybersecurity is not something that develops by itself. You need to support it. You need to anticipate crises. And then we had another example. I have another example. I had a customer that had protected themselves, and they still had an accident. It's about luck. It's just like when you roll the dice. And this will be my conclusion. I've been a bit too long today, so what I suggest is that you come and meet me on the stand. It's stand C9. It would be a pleasure. Thank you very much.